Welcome, everybody. Dave Miller, Fidelity National Home Warranty. I'm joined today by Catherine Holbert, attorney in the state of Nevada. Catherine, how are you?
I'm great today. How are you doing, Dave?
Fantastic. Well, on behalf of CRES Insurance and the E&O Insurance and Fidelity National Home Warranty and all of our clients, we'd like to welcome you today for another risk management update in the great state of Nevada. Catherine, you're always on the pulse of what's going on. And you called me last week and said, we probably need to do an update because you are having some claims with what you're calling unrepresented buyers. And explain to us why all of a sudden this is an issue. I'm assuming it has something to do with the NAR settlement, but why is this different now than before? And then if you could just tell me what exactly is an unrepresented buyer?
I am happy to get into all of that. And yes, it is becoming more and more of an issue now, and it's directly related to that, the lawsuits, the class action lawsuits on how commissions are paid in the real estate industry and the changes that are coming about as a result of the settlement that the National Association of Realtors is in the process still of entering into to finalize those lawsuits. And traditionally, the seller has paid both sides of the commission. You usually, as a seller, you sign a listing agreement with, say, a 5 or 6% commission, and part of that is shared with whomever represented the buyer. So it was very easy for buyers to obtain representation, and in fact, a lot of buyers agents would advertise at no cost to you. And the most lay people, general population, was never really certain how that all worked. And that was the reason for the lawsuit. And the sellers are like, we don't want to pay this anymore. And everybody, including NAR, basically agreed. And part of the settlement actually requires that any agent that is going to represent a buyer does so under a written buyer brokers agreement. Buyer broker agreements have existed forever in various forms, but they have been very underutilized. And I would say probably 90% of agents working in Nevada have never used a buyer broker agreement before. But that's going to be required because the payment is going to be required from the buyer. And so the buyers, of course, are saying, I don't want to pay you. I
Yeah.
can't pay you. I'm just going to do this myself. So an unrepresented buyer is just that, a buyer that approaches the listing agent that's representing the seller and is not working with their agent, an agent on their own. And it can be very difficult because it's hard to even ask somebody, are you represented as a buyer? Because they don't understand, especially first-time home buyers. So a listing agent may get a call and say, hey, I want to see the property. And they're saying, well, you're working with an agent. Well, not really. But are you really unrepresented? Are you not unrepresented? What exactly is going on? So that's a conversation that you have to have when you just get a call from somebody that says, hey, I want to see your property.
Sure. Now you're mentioning a big increase in unrepresented buyers. Is it mainly because they just want to avoid paying commissions and they want to try to do it themselves? That sounds very dangerous to enter
It is
into.
very dangerous.
Yeah, why would
And,
they do
and
that?
right. And part of the big problem is they just do not understand
Yeah.
how dangerous that is. But they don't have access. They can't write an offer. They don't have access to the various forms. And an interesting thing that, again, most general people aren't aware of, as the lawsuit was going on, there was a lot of media coverage and articles and stuff about no other country has such an expensive commission. And that is true. However, most other countries, there is only one agent involved, just the seller. And if you want to buy a house, you approach the seller's agent and say, I want to buy this house. And they write the offer and say, sign this offer. This is it. And there's no negotiation. So generally the house prices are higher in those other countries. And it's a harder thing. And there's nobody to help the buyer through all the steps. And really, if you're looking at a transaction, the seller doesn't have to do very much. They list their home, maybe do some repairs, some disclosures. That's it. Really, the bulk of what has to be done in a transaction is done by the buyer. And they have to be able to communicate with home inspectors, appraisers, loan people, everything like that, that they just really don't even know what they don't know. And that's the scary thing with unrepresented buyers. And so if the seller gets a call, it's just, the first thing you have to try to figure out is, are you truly unrepresented? Or are you working with an agent and just don't want to sign the agreement yet with them and want to see this house? What is actually going on is just your first step when you're the listing agent and get a call from just a person.
Do you think listing agents are picking up buyers by asking that? Hey, you're unrepresented. I can represent you as well. We know dual agency's dangerous, but are you seeing that pattern?
Yes, and actually dual agency is allowed in Nevada. It's not allowed everywhere, so make sure you check your state if you're not in Nevada and watching this. But Nevada does allow dual agency. Now there are a couple of different types of dual agency, and then they aren't really clarified or specified under the law. But I like to differentiate them out because I think it matters. I call pure dual agency when exactly the same agent represents both the buyer and the seller.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you have two agents that have the same broker, that is still technically dual agency because both the buyer and the seller are represented by the same brokerage, but they have different agents. And I am very comfortable with like the dual agency with different agents and the same broker. That I don't think is problematic on any level. However, if you've got exactly the same agent representing the buyer and the seller, it becomes very problematic because it's almost impossible to resolve those conflicts of interest. And it really is not a good idea if the buyer is a first-time home buyer.
Wow.
They just don't have enough experience, I don't think, to make an informed consent to dual representation. Dual agency works better and better the more experienced the buyer and the seller are. If you've got very experienced people that have done this before and are familiar with the process and know the documents they're reading, the burdens on the agent to educate people is much less. But with a first-time home buyer, they just need so much specialized individual representation that dual agency will always be problematic.
And your recommendation is if it's the same office, at least have two separate agents doing it, even if the one agent refers it to another one. Hey, can you handle that side so that I'm not put in a position?
Exactly. So if you're a listing agent and you get truly an unrepresented buyer that is interested in the property you're selling, your first thing is you really should have representation. I can help you with that. I know there's somebody else in my office. I don't want to do it. And you can't just say, there's proper ways to say that. Probably the best way to simply say is my office. And most offices do, because most insurances will not insure a pure dual agency transaction. And so most offices don't allow agents to do that. But so you can just say, I'm not allowed to represent you because I represent the seller. However, I know there's somebody with my office that'll be glad to help you. Would you like me to help you get in touch with somebody else that can represent you?
Right.
Now, of course, they may say, no, I'm not interested in having anybody represent me at all. I'm going to represent myself in this. That is harder for you, but as you representing the seller, you can't turn away a potential buyer just because I don't want to do it.
That's my next question. You're telling us about the dangers of being an unrepresented buyer. If I'm a seller and have two orders or two bids for my home, if I know that one is an unrepresented buyer, should I not accept that one because there might be more troubles, or should I go with the one that's represented by an agent?
Well, it doesn't really make a difference to the buyer, to the seller.
Okay.
It makes a difference to the agent, and the agent should not push the one offer ahead of the other offer just because one is unrepresented. They should go ahead and just consider both offers for whatever they are, and try to make an apples to apples comparison as best as they can, and help the seller decide, which offer they should take. Totally ignoring the fact that one is submitted by an unrepresented buyer. Now, where I'm very concerned about issues coming into play is that listing broker says, the potential buyer says, absolutely, I don't want any representation at all. And the listing agent says, that's fine. But then the potential buyer says, I want to submit an offer. I don't have a form. If you just even give them that form and help them out, especially if it's a first-time home buyer, in their mind, you're representing them.
You just put on that hat.
You just put on that hat. And of course, in Nevada, you can't print out those forms without your name being on the bottom of it. And so, it's clear that that's where they got that form. And so that's part of that. Just don't do it. Just say, if you're determined to represent yourself, that's fine. You can do that, but I can't help you represent yourself. You either need to do it yourself or you need to go find an agent to help you. And I strongly recommend you go find an agent to help you. So whatever form they pull off the internet might play into the fact, as you're comparing those offers apples to apples, it may be very difficult to do that, because you may get a form from the unrepresented buyer that is just not even really in compliance with the state of Nevada. And so those offers will be much more likely to be put aside just by the buyer or by the seller, which is another disadvantage of being an unrepresented buyer,
And you've told me in the past, in Nevada, the state forms in northern Nevada are different from southern, right? So that even adds another level of trickiness, if you will, to that.
Yes, so in Nevada anyway, the majority of the forms are not produced by the Nevada Division of Real Estate. They are put out by the individual MLS associations.
Gotcha. So that's even more information to know. You've got to be in the right area to get the right forms.
Right. And of course, the MLS is very protective of their forms, and you've got to be a member of the MLS to get them.
So I think I know the answer to this, but if an unrepresented buyer really wants to save that commission and represent themselves, would you advise them to maybe at least seek counsel from a real estate attorney, maybe to help them guide through that transaction?
Yes. But I'll tell you, that is and it's very common back east, as a lot of people know, to use attorneys instead of title companies, and even instead of agents. We don't, not only in Nevada, but really kind of in the West, we use title companies. And I've gotten those calls. I have gotten a lot of those calls as an attorney since this NAR settlement announcement came out. And you know what I tell people that call me that say, will you represent me in my real estate transaction? Well, I'll say, I'll look at your documents, but I am not calling the appraiser. I am not talking to the home inspector. I am not talking to your loan officer. And I basically have convinced every one of them to go hire a real estate agent.
Yes.
Because there is so much that a real estate agent will do for them, that at least I, as an attorney, and maybe they can find an attorney that will do all of that. But I'm too busy being an attorney to be a real estate agent. I don't want to be a real estate agent.
Well, not only that, real estate agents have errors and omissions insurance, which protects them for errors and omissions during the real estate transaction and even afterwards. So,
but yes, crazy. I mean, so if you're the listing agent, you can definitely say, you should at least, especially if they say, I don't have a form, then say, well, if you're not going to hire a real estate agent, you should go talk to an attorney about, helping you draft an offer.
Right. Now, you suggested a secondary form that the unrepresented buyer sign in addition to the state required. I think you called it a duties owed form. What language does this form contain, and how does it help keep the parties stay out of real estate litigation?
Yeah, well, the duties owed form that's put out by the Nevada Division of Real Estate that everybody has to sign that's involved in a real estate transaction is just that. It's a list of like, these are the duties that I as a real estate agent owe you. And there's a section, it starts with a section that these are the duties I owe everyone. The duty to be truthful, the duty to disclose, the duty to, be a good agent and, meet my statutory duties and things like that. And then there's a bottom section that is, these are the duties that I owe my own clients, but only my own clients. And so this secondary form just kind of highlights and reiterates that. And like, I do not owe you, and has all of those things that I won't do for you specifically. I don't owe you these duties because I don't represent you and you have chosen to be unrepresented. You don't have anybody that's going to help you with all of these things. And you're responsible for making sure that, I mean, if your loan doesn't close because you didn't get an appraisal, that's on you. And so that's the purpose of that secondary form, to educate them, but really also strongly encourage them and educate them of the need to have an agent. Really, everybody should be represented. Nobody should be trying to do this themselves. I honestly just recently bought a house myself. I used a real estate agent. So really,
That's very telling. That is very telling right there.
Seriously, I did. Like, I'm not talking to the appraiser. I'm not talking to the inspectors.
Right.
I just want to see the reports at the end of the day. Really, everybody should have representation when they buy and sell a house.
Right.
And if somebody is just absolutely determined that they are not going to have an agent and want to do this themselves, the listing agent needs to educate them as much as possible, the risk that they're taking by making that decision, and what they're going to have to do on their own to get this transaction closed.
Right. What I'm hearing here is that everybody has a job and they should stay in their lane. Listing agents, buying agents, buyers and sellers, everybody should just do what they're supposed to do and hire the professionals to do what they do. And that's the realtors that are out there. So I always ask you this, look into the crystal ball here. Is this going away anytime soon, or is it only going to get worse?
I think that all of this is going to continue to evolve, and there are still sellers paying part of your commission. Even if the seller is not advertising that they'll pay part of the buyer's commission, a buyer can always ask for it, just like they've always asked for closing costs. So you can, this is not going to, I think a lot of buyers have been scared by the media that's out there. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm now going to have to pay this commission. Not necessarily. There are still ways around that. FHA just passed new rules allowing the buyers to pay their own commission. And I hope eventually where it moves, because the reality is any buyer that is financing has always financed the commissions, all of the commissions, because it's been built into the purchase price.
Sure.
And so if the lenders just finally start telling the buyers, you can finance this, theoretically anyway, the house prices would come down instead of being, having that 4% or 5% or whatever included in the purchase price. It will no longer do that. But it's all going to be, it's going to be a much more open negotiation than it has ever been before, which I personally think is a good thing. And so if you, go talk to a broker, and say, it's got to be the biggest difference with all of this to me is conversations that should have been happening all along that weren't, are going to have to start happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so right when you sit down with a buyer broker, you're going to have a conversation. How am I going to pay for this house? How am I going to pay for this, for your commission? How are you going to get paid? If I don't have enough to buy the house and pay you, I don't want the agents to get to the end of this and say, hey, the only way this transaction is going to close is if I give up most of my commission. Have those conversations right up front, figure out how it's going to happen, figure out if we can only look at houses where the buyer's paying, or the seller's going to pay your buyer's commission, only look at those houses. If you need to ask in your offer for contribution to commissions, ask for it. Nobody not any broker, not any agent, not any buyer should be interpreting any of these new revisions as I can't have representation anymore. Because
Right.
that is not the reality. And everybody still should have representation. Everybody can have representation. There's ways to make it work and figure it out. And everybody should have representation.
Well, it's always historically been where the listing agent, it's a very competitive a job, I guess, to get that listing because they have so many choices of listing agents. It seems like now it's even harder to get buyers to commit to you and to say that you're going to be represented by them. I think there's going to be a challenge for agents to get buyers involved and get that signed. Do you see the same thing there?
Yes, and I have seen so many different buyer broker agreements.
Yeah.
Because really the rule that the NRA wants to do is you can't show a house without a buyer broker agreement.
Okay.
So I've seen buyer broker agreements that are basically for one showing of one house.
Wow.
Like I'll show on a flat fee, like I'll show you this one property for $100.
Right.
And then, you know, whatever. So there is the gamut of buyer broker agreements, and you can reach an agreement with whoever you want to represent you for whatever terms you want. All of that, like I said, is negotiable and should be discussed. And what is it that you need? If you're only interested in one property, just sign a buyer broker agreement related to that one property. If you have no idea what you want to buy and you need an agent's expertise to help you find the right property for you, that's a different buyer broker agreement that you're signing, because your needs are different.
So the terms can change on those. You could say this is for 30 days, this is for 45 days. After that, I'm off.
Yes, absolutely. I have seen, like I said, across the gamut, and it's absolutely, you know, a negotiable contract. And buyers should be shopping for the right agent for them, and they should be talking to more than one. And I hope it gets as competitive for the buyers agents as it's always been for the selling agents. And they are going to have to prove their worth to these potential buyers that are coming in, and convince them that of the value of what they're bringing to the table for the commission that they're going to get.
Do those forms stand up in court as if I were to breach my contract or my agreement with my buyer's agent and go with somebody else just before the deadline? What would happen in that case?
Well, traditionally, a lot of those agreements have been enforced at the MLS level.
Okay.
And it's just a fight between the two brokers. That is probably going to go away. And it will be more of the broker would have to sue the actual former client, the former buyer. But yes, they're absolutely, I mean, you know, there's always caveats and exactly how was it written and all of that. But yes, they're enforceable contracts that a court is absolutely going to look at and enforce to the extent that's possible.
Okay. Well, bottom line, should brokers and agents work with unrepresented buyers or not work with unrepresented buyers?
They should always encourage the buyers to get representation. If the buyer flat out refuses to get representations, they should work with that buyer, but always be aware that their cooperation and working with the buyer never ever crosses the line into actually representing the buyer. They're going to have to communicate with them. They can't give them forms, or they shouldn't give them forms. They shouldn't help them fill out the forms. But they're going to have to communicate and work with them. But make sure, because the worst thing, that's the worst case scenario, is you're doing both the work and you're only getting paid once, and now you've tripled your exposure, or, you know, your liability, and doubled your work, and, you know, not increased your income at all. So don't do it.
So your answer, of course, is if you do it, just do so with extreme caution.
Extreme caution, absolutely.
Extreme caution. Catherine Holbert, always appreciate your time. You're always on the pulse of what's going on in the state of Nevada with E&O claims, and we appreciate your time so much being with us today.
I'm so happy to be here as always, and like to do whatever I can to help the industry.
I'm sure we'll be back in a couple months with another hot topic on behalf of CRES Insurance and all their E&O clients in Nevada, and all of our Fidelity National Home Warranty and CRES Advantage clients in Nevada. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.